Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hassan, back with a brand new episode here on The Truth. Back once again with my boy, AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing here today? We're finally not doing mock drafts.
Yeah, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling a little controversial,
Yeah,
also. Yeah,
yeah.
I'll make some people, I don't know if upset, but really question my thoughts about players, I guess.
I think too, like with sleepers and busts, which we're starting our four-part series here today with quarterbacks, like it's one of those things that you could always argue back and forth, regardless, and nobody's going to know the right answer. But it feels so great when you finally get a sleeper or a bust right. Like if you're like, "Hey, I said this guy was going to be a sleeper, look what he did," or "Hey, I thought this guy was going to be a bust, look what he did." Trust me, we sometimes make the right calls, we sometimes don't. But we hope that we can continue to make the right calls so we look really good on paper. But anyways, guys, we're doing sleepers and busts here. We're taking a break from mock draft. We're going to go ahead and do sleepers and busts. Originally, we were going to do 5 sleepers and busts each. And although I do really like that, I did want to condense it down a little bit just because I feel like shorter episodes are easier to follow and we can really provide more in depth if we want for these sleepers and busts. So we got 3 quarterbacks each. We made sure we did not have the same guys. So technically, you'll get 6 busts and 6 sleepers for the fantasy season upcoming. We'll start with bust and go ahead and give me your first quarterback bust this fantasy football season.
Yeah, so my first one, I have Brock Purdy, and it's not because of like what he's done. I just don't believe he's able to redo this every single year. I mean, what he's done in the NFL, being the last pick, Mr. Irrelevant, to go into the Super Bowl like that. I mean, crazy, but it's the offensive system that gets it done. It's Christian McCaffrey being healthy and doing what he's able to do. Having Debo, having Ayuk. There's a chance Ayuk's not going to be there. Is Ricky Pearsall going to step up into that role? Who knows? I mean, he's injured right now, I believe, with a hamstring injury, so he really hasn't been able to do much in camp yet. I don't know. George Kittle really hasn't been as efficient as he was earlier in his career. He's still solid, but he's not really being drafted in fantasy for a reason anymore. Or he's drafted him much later than what he was. I just don't see him going out and having another huge year. I mean, there's got to be one of these years where Purdy just hits a wall. And honestly, year 2/3. I mean, he started later in the year, his rookie year, but he's got to hit a wall at some point. There's going to be games where he's going to have a great game. I'm not going to take that away from him because it's the system. But if Ayuk's not there, Debo can't be as effective as he was. I mean, we've seen them step away from Debo being more of that dual threat guy, and I think they want to try to get back to that. But who knows? It's the system. There's got to be some point where you can't just plug in any quarterback you want. There's a reason Mike Purdy was the last pick as in the draft. Has he proven everyone wrong up to this point? Yes, but there's got to be a wall that he hits and that he kind of just stays right at. And people, I think he's going to keep taking a step forward and another step forward. It's like no, there's a wall you got to hit at some point, especially because he doesn't have the strongest arm. He doesn't have the most accurate arm. Is he good at them? Yes, but he's not Patrick Mahomes out there in that offense. He has his limits also.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about Purdy later for no apparent reason. But my first bust is going to be CJ Stroud. And I had to start off with CJ Stroud because if you guys remember last year, I was the biggest CJ Stroud hater. It's not so much that I'm a CJ Stroud hater this year. It's just like I don't expect him to have the same amount of success that he did. And to be honest, in my opinion, he didn't have as great of success as people gave him credit for. I mean, sure, he finished as the ninth position ranked quarterback, but 4,100 yards, only 23 touchdowns. The big thing was the 5 interceptions. He only had 3 rushing touchdowns. I know CJ Stroud wasn't a big rushing quarterback, but if he was able to have more rushing production, I really would have believed that he could have potentially become a top 5 quarterback. He also missed 2 games with a concussion. It just all in all, was a good year because he was doing far better than people projected him, including myself. But going into this year, I just don't see how much more better he can be. I understand you bring in Stephon Diggs, but I'm a Stephon Diggs fan myself when he was with the Vikings. I know what Stephon Diggs can do to a team. I'm just concerned that he's going to cause more harm than good. But there are a lot of mouths to feed in Houston, so he's got a lot of options to throw to. The only thing that I would say that would really make his production go up is if he's able to run the ball more than 167 yards this season, and that will really help him. I think another thing that I'm shying away from CJ Stroud is his ADP is way too high. I mean, he's sometimes selected as the fourth or fifth quarterback off the board. I understand people are expecting him to make a jump from the ninth position ranked quarterback to the top 5, but I think he's just drafted way too high. And for me, I look at ADP a lot as far as if I think they're going to be a sleeper or a bust, because this is one of those things you're expecting a third or fourth round quarterback to be a top five quarterback that hasn't proven that yet. So I'm shying away from him as much as possible, even though he did have a good rookie season, a great rookie season to say the least. He's going to throw some interceptions in his career. I think his biggest thing is if he can rush the ball more efficiently, he'll be a great quarterback in this league. All right, your second bust.
My second bust, I have Baker Mayfield. And I love Baker Mayfield's story up to this point, bouncing around team to team. But last year, he had a career high in passing yards, career high in touchdowns, only 10 interceptions, which in comparison to years where he's had 8, but he's also had years where he had 21 interceptions his second year. It was good, but Mike Evans getting older. I mean, is he going to keep that 1,000 yard streak going? Who knows? Chris Godwin's a shell of himself. He's a cone. Shout out BDGE. That reference. He's just doesn't really do anything. Running back room's questionable. Rashad White's been all right. He has the talent, but they don't really use him. Bucky Irving and Jay McMillan are two rookies they brought on the offensive side, but how much production are you really going to get out of them? I just don't expect him to take another step forward from career highs he's already had. When he had a good supporting cast, I wouldn't say his rookie year, but his second, third year, even his fourth year in 2021 with Cleveland, he had a better supporting cast every single year, and he gotten better, but he also didn't play that good with better players as a whole. This offense is just aging. They don't really have a tight end. I believe Cade Otton is their tight end at the moment. He's not really someone I'm looking forward to having a lot of production. I don't know if there's another step forward that he can take from the same type of production he gets. Now, could he have very similar production? Yes, but I expect a lot more than a couple more picks than 10. I don't expect him to be close to 30 touchdowns. Maybe in that 22 to 25 range, I could see maybe closer to 32 to 3,500 yards, not 4,000. I just think everything is going to take a little bit of a step down. I think just everything kind of clicked correctly. Him going to Tampa, and with that offense, just having to throw a lot more, which helped out there because they were losing a lot of games early on and had to have a lot of comebacks. Also, that game against the Texans where he had like 400, 500 yards and like 3 or 4 touchdowns right there really helped out those stats. And I'll expect him to have multiple games like that.
Yeah, Baker is one of those guys that I had said as well it was going to be a bust, and I'd let AJ talk about Baker, but I mean, I agree with everything that he said, right? Baker's at this point of his career, yeah, he signed an extension, but you know, is he one of those guys that's going to be a difference maker? Who knows? I guess only time will tell, especially not for fantasy purposes. My next one's going to be Matthew Stafford. Look, Matthew Stafford, I wouldn't say he has struggled with injuries. He has in recent years, but he only missed one game besides the final game of the year against the 49ers. And he was a 15th position ranked quarterback. And in a 16 team league, you're happy if you have good depth elsewhere. But he averaged 16 fantasy points a week. He's not one of those guys that's going to, jump off the page. I believe his highest scoring game was like 23 and a half in week 14. At times you want quarterbacks that are going to be big difference makers, especially since, quarterbacks are such a vital position in fantasy. But Matthew Stafford just didn't prove that to me. And going into this year, I'm expecting more production from Cooper Kupp. I think Puka's going to decline a little bit, but there is going to be some options to throw the ball to. I think though, with Kyron Williams and how much of a resurgence, or I guess emergence, I could say with Kyron, that he had last year, they're going to really focus on running the football. That's just what Sean McVay and the Rams have always done. Matthew Stafford, in a way, could be a game manager, but he's not a Brock Purdy as far as where he's at in his career. He's getting towards the end of his career. This could be it for Matthew Stafford. And we've seen in the past, quarterbacks that are in their final year or two, like Big Ben, for example, really just not have success whatsoever. So I think a lot of people expected Matthew Stafford to be a bust. The only way that I would select Matthew Stafford for my fantasy team is if, it was a 14 or 16 team league and I waited on quarterback like I did in our 16 team mock and wanted him as a backup quarterback even, I wouldn't even probably select him as my QB1. All right, your final bust.
So my final bust is Kirk Cousins. It's a factor because of age.
Boo!
He's not a Viking anymore. I don't know why you're booing him. I'm booing him because he's a Falcon. He's a Falcon player now.
That's true, yeah.
But last year he had the best wide receiver in the league before he got injured, Justin Jefferson. He had Jordan Addison, who didn't have the best year in the beginning, first half season, but progressively got better. But really couldn't do anything with him. Had a healthy T.J. Hawkinson, if I remember correctly. Hawkinson was injured in like the second midway through the season last year. Had an okay running game for the Vikings, but honestly, it doesn't really matter for fantasy value as much because you'd rather your quarterback throw for a lot more. But one of the things is he adds no rushing upside there. I don't think that they will add any rushing upside there with Atlanta because they have Bijan. They're going to have to feed him the ball. They really like Tyler Algier still. They're going to have to give him the ball. And maybe it's through the air a little bit here and there, but the carries are going to have to go up for Bijan. I think everyone expected him to have a lot more carries last year, and he really didn't. Those have to go up. Maybe it goes away from Algier's touches, but Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Drake's been good so far in his career, but Kyle Pitts has been awful. He's had up and down years where he's either scoring 5 touchdowns but having 300 yards or having 1,000 yards and no touchdowns. It's either or. And I feel like just his supporting cast has just gone downhill. His offensive line got better going over to Atlanta compared to the Vikings, but we just don't know. We've never seen Drake London perform at such a high level. We haven't seen Kyle Pitts perform at a high level. We expect Bijan to because of having such a good rookie year and the type of role and how he was used. But again, Kirk Cousins, what's going to be 36 coming off an Achilles injury. I know it's a little hypocritical that I have Aaron Rodgers as my dark horse MVP coming off an Achilles injury, but there's also a difference between Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, in my opinion. And Kirk Cousins, his supporting cast just hasn't done it before. We haven't seen it before, so we just don't. I just don't know what type of production you're going to get out of him. Granted, they play in a really bad division as a whole. I mean, they're playing the Panthers twice a year, so that should be a good amount of fantasy points there. But there's a point where they're going to be up by 20 points and they're just running the ball, and he's going to be out of the game. So I feel like there's going to be times like that where they just hand the ball to Bijan, or will dump off to Bijan for a couple yards and just try and get the clock to wind down.
My final bust is Jalen Hurts. And I know this is going to surprise a lot of people, but let's not forget Jalen Hurts was the number two fantasy quarterback last season. And a lot of that was because he had 15 touchdowns. And a lot of that was because he had a Hall of Fame center in Jason Kelsey, 15 rushing touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's hard to like predict this, but you see things like that have so much success, like the tush push. Eventually, teams are going to figure it out, right? Teams are going to figure out how to stop it. I think teams are going to figure it out more going into this year. On top of that, you don't have a Hall of Fame center pushing the pile to allow the tush push to happen. So I think his rushing touchdown numbers are definitely going to dip below 10. He's not going to be as successful in the red zone as he has in years past. On top of that, they bring in Saquon Barkley, whose main goal is to take pressure off Jalen Hurts in the red zone to keep him out of trouble. And then you look at Jalen Hurts' passing ability. Look, he threw for 3,800 yards, but he had 23 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. That concerns me. He's definitely going to be nowhere near the top two as far as quarterbacks are concerned. With a lot of quarterbacks, obviously, there can be injuries and stuff. Hurts is a guy that's relatively stayed healthy, but I just don't see him being anywhere near the top two. I really don't have him in my top five. I think more than anything, I don't think he's a bust. I think if you get him, great, but his ADP is way too high, and people are projecting him to be the same Jalen Hurts that he was in years past. He's just not going to be, unfortunately. So sorry, Eagles fans, but Jalen Hurts is my final bust. All right, let's go on to sleepers. Give me your first quarterback sleeper.
So here's the other side of the coin of the Achilles injury. Aaron Rodgers, my first sleeper. And it's because his ADP is like, I don't know, round 14 in like a
Yeah,
12
it's pretty
man
late.
league. 12 6. I mean, the last time we saw Aaron Rodgers fully healthy in Green Bay, 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. 12 interceptions is wild for him. He usually has like 5 interceptions. And now he's going to a much better supporting cast, much better O line. He has true weapons now in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. And we didn't get to see any of that. We saw 15 seconds of him running around the pocket, and then there goes the Achilles and him going down. I just expect him to have a much better year. Great defense there to give him the ball back. He's my dark horse MVP candidate. I really like him for this year. He's technically 1-0 with the Jets because he started that game and they won. I don't know. I just think that he could have a really bounce back year, especially for how late you can draft him. I mean, he's already had injuries in his career and bounced back and won MVPs. He was back to back MVPs just 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now. He won back to back MVPs. I don't know if he'll get quite to that level, but again, sub 10 interceptions. He's going to get you close to 30 touchdowns, give you right around 4,000 yards. I'll take that at minimum as my backup quarterback if I'm getting him in the 12th through 14th, even like with your last pick potentially. People kind of just forget about Aaron Rodgers right now in fantasy. He's someone that you can just go scoop up as a backup quarterback who can turn into your QB1.
So mine's gonna be Brock Purdy. I know you said he was a bust for you. I really don't know why. I think Brock Purdy, I was very against Brock Purdy, but seeing what he did, it's not necessarily his talent, but the situation he's in. And he's embraced it. He's a game manager. And I mean, as a fantasy owner, I sometimes like game managers, especially with one of the best offenses, in my opinion, in NFL history. This is a perfect opportunity for Brock Purdy. I mean, stats wise, threw for just about 4,300 yards, 31 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. If he could even sniff just a little bit more rushing value, this is a guy that would be a top five, top three quarterback. He finished as the QB6 last year. I think a lot of people are thinking that Brock Purdy isn't, a legit quarterback, and fine. I don't think he's a legit quarterback in of itself either. But his situation's perfect, and sometimes for fantasy, you need a perfect situation. He's also drafted way lower than people should be drafting him. I've drafted him in a couple of the mock drafts that I've had, and he's a guy that you could wait for as a quarterback and get a lot more production than a lot of the quarterbacks that are going to be drafted ahead of him. So it's a win-win situation, in my opinion, with Brock Purdy. Not necessarily the talent, but the situation he's in. Now, granted, losing Debo Ayuk, which at the moment could possibly happen, could hinder him. But the biggest thing is his offensive line and how much time he has in the pocket to deliver his throws and does everything that you ask for with nearly a 70% completion percentage. All right, your second sleeper.
My second sleeper, I have Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray could have a great year this year. He's coming back off of it. Well, came back off of injury last year, coming back in the second half of the season. Yeah, he went 3-5 or whatever it was, but he had 1,800 passing yards in those 8 games, 10 touchdowns. Yeah, he had 5 interceptions, but he also had good rushing value there. He also didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr. like how he's going to have this season. I think everyone expecting him to have a great year. Che McBride, we saw the emergence of him finally. I think he's going to take another step forward. He's going to be one of the top tight ends. I think he's tight end 4 or 5 right now in fantasy where he's being drafted. I think Kyler Murray, just between the rushing and passing, just the weapons he's gotten now. I think a lot of people forget Kyler Murray was a rookie of the year. And after that, the next 2 years were Pro Bowl years. 2 years ago now, in 2022, he got injured. I mean, he missed most of the year, had a solid year up to that point. 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, kind of what you expect from him. 2,400 yards. I mean, some rushing value. Didn't really have as much a couple years ago because of the injury, but I expect him to be now, what, a year, a little bit more than a year and a half past that injury. I expect him to be fully healthy, new offense that he's actually going to be able to uh, have now because he actually has a wide receiver one, Marvin Harrison. And I don't know, he's drafted really late or even goes undrafted most of the time, it feels like. If you're in a deeper league, he's someone that you're able to go pick up. Same with Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers isn't there, go pick up Kyler Murray later in the draft because he has that QB1 upside. It's just we haven't seen it in a couple years. Same with Aaron Rodgers. We haven't seen it. So there's question marks around it. But his supporting cast has just gotten better since the injury. And I expect him to bounce back in a much better offense.
So for me, my second is going to be Trevor Lawrence, and this is the first year that I'm going to be buying shares of Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I wasn't a big Trevor Lawrence fan coming out of college. I know obviously the situation at Clemson was perfect, going to Jacksonville, whatever, but it was kind of a crappy situation to be in. But now Trevor Lawrence has kind of established himself as far as his ability to be in the league. He's now got a lot of options. He's got Christian Kirk to throw the ball to. He's still got Evan Ingram, and you bring in BTJ and Gabe Davis. I mean, he's got a lot of mouths to feed, which is always a great thing at the quarterback position. He does do some rushing. I mean, just average as far as rushing, 339 yards and 4 touchdowns. Biggest thing is the discrepancies from touchdown to interceptions. It's a small ratio, 21 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. I know they run the ball with ETN a lot. I think Bigsby's going to get some carries, but Trevor Lawrence, I think he'd get upset of 27, 28 touchdowns and get under 10 interceptions, which that of itself would have propelled them from a 12th ranked position quarterback to a ninth or 10th ranked position quarterback. So I think the situation is absolutely ideal for Trevor Lawrence. I'm not, saying go out and draft him in the fourth round, but again, he's going to be a good bang for your buck, a guy that's probably drafted around Brock Purdy range and could really kind of be a difference maker. And quarterbacks like this, right? I know quarterbacks are important, especially, in general, but in PPR leagues, you're going to have more of a focus on wide receivers. You get a quarterback that was a 12th ranked position quarterback last year and get him anywhere inside the top 7 with the talent that you've built around your fantasy rosters. That's a recipe for success, and that's how you're going to win your fantasy championship. I think T Lock could definitely be a big part of that. All right, who's your final sleeper?
So my final sleeper, I have Jane Daniels. I think Jane Daniels is being drafted in like the third, fourth tier of quarterbacks. right now, and he has some of the best rushing upside of any quarterback. I think it's like it's him, Lamar, and Anthony Richardson, and Josh Allen. You could throw in there as like the top four running quarterbacks here. And I get Jane Daniels is a little bit smaller guy. He doesn't have the arm as an Anthony Richardson or a Josh Allen, but last year in college, 40 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. I get it. He had two first round wide receivers on that team, but 3,800 yards on the rushing side. He had 1,100 rushing yards with 10 rushing touchdowns. Do I think he's going to have to put up those numbers? No, because that's QB1, entire fantasy quarterback one at the end of the year numbers. But do I think that he's going to be able to rush a lot? Yes, because he plays for the Commanders. That Commanders O line kind of sucks. So he's going to be running for his life a good amount. And you know what? If that's going to get him to 80 yards a game on the ground, I'll take that right there. Probably a rushing touch. I wouldn't say a rushing touchdown game, but a rushing touchdown every other game. So he finishes with what 8, 9 rushing touchdowns. He has an okay receiving core. We haven't really seen it. Diami Brown has been, I guess, since getting drafted. Terry McLaurin's been great, but never had a true quarterback there. I think with Jane Daniels being able to give him the ball. And also, what I've heard from about the Commanders in this offense, Jane Daniels is going to be able to kind of just get the ball out of his hands really quickly. It's more of that pro style offense, be able to get him on the move, out of the pocket, be able to have him just go out and create. Because that's kind of what Jane's Jane Daniels needed to do at LSU is just go create for himself, go create for his wide receivers. You didn't really have that at Arizona because he didn't have the weapons. But once you get him good enough weapons, he's able to just go out, roll out, run for himself, or be able to go launch the ball a good amount. I mean, he's not going to get not an 80-yard pass and through the air, but we could see 50 yards in the air, him running out of the pocket, kind of like Kyler Murray.
So my final sleeper's got to be Kirk Thuggins, not Kirk Cousins. Look, I know you're hating on Kirk Thuggins, but
Ooh.
look, I think Kirk. I mean, look, in when he got injured last year, he was a top five quarterback, arguably top three as far as fantasy, and he doesn't run the ball. I mean, it's Kirk Cousins. He sits in the pocket and throws. Now, granted, he was in a good situation. He had Justin Jefferson, he had Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, you name it, but he's going to a similar grouping, just a lot younger with no experience. This is a team that's been craving quarterback play. I mean, Drake London and Kyle Pitts have been standing at the edge of a cliff asking for a quarterback, and they've been blessed with the
Lieutenant.
Greek god, Kirk Cousins. And then you think of Bijan Robinson, the skill set that he's able to have. This is a skill set that Kirk Cousins has never really dealt with, whether in Washington or in Minnesota. He's never really had a reliable back that could be a great pass catcher besides Dalvin Cook for like 1 year. Bijan Robinson can do both. Bijan Robinson can run the ball efficiently. Bijan Robinson can pass catch it efficiently. And that's going to take some of the stress off Kirk Cousins. And I know it's going to start a little bit rough for Kirk Cousins, coming back from that torn Achilles injury, but he's a guy that's drafted way lower than I ever expected. I know there's obviously a lot of debate. I don't usually like guys that are going to a new team for the first year, but I think I just know what Kirk Cousins has been able to do. Yeah, I'm a big Kirk Cousins fan. I'll be honest. Everyone is. I mean, how could you not like the guy? But I really think that with the young core that he's got there, he's going to set them up for success, which in turn is going to help him for success. And that Atlanta Falcons team might not contend because I don't really like their defense, but their offense is going to look a lot better now that Arthur Smith is not at the helm, crushing the fantasy dreams of Kyle Pitts and even Drake London for that matter. I think Kirk Cousins, especially for how low he drafted, could really be a crucial piece to your fantasy team. Thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter at The Truth as one to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information of value you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are you looking for a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy level, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharp, focused, and memory? Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity, while also maintaining ecosystem-friendly products. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.